Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you all here for the Rapid Response Program on Leadership Development, Level 1, Lead Self, Module 4, and today we're focusing on emotional intelligence. Today's session, as mentioned, will focus on emotional intelligence and cover the concepts such as leadership, self-awareness, self-reflection, performance, morale, compassion, empathy, and much more. I'd now like to pass it over to my co-chair, Fire Chief Greg Jones, to introduce today's speaker.
All right, thank you very much, Chief Bosno, and good day, everybody. I'm pleased today to introduce today's speaker, Dave Brand, with Aprx Approach Professional Coaching. Some of you may already be familiar with Dave, as he's been a speaker at Fire Rescue Canada last year. Dave is a certified professional coach with over 2 decades of leadership experience in the private and public sector. Dave has delivered leadership energy training to multiple municipal sector groups and teams, spoken on leadership energy at virtual, local, national, and international conferences. He understands the requirements of the fire service through his past decade of leadership in the emergency service sector. In addition to being a leader, Dave is also a firefighter, a technical rescuer, a USAR specialist, and a professional emergency manager with extensive leadership exposure in incidents ranging from both local to national. And Dave also helps public safety leaders authentically elevate their team performance. So without further ado, I'll now pass it over to you, Dave, and thank you very much as he talks more to you about emotional intelligence.
Well, thank you very much, Chief, and thanks everyone for being here. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about leadership energy with you all today. We'll just make sure we get that. So what we're going to talk about today, it's framed under emotional intelligence, but I'm going to get into some specifics for you that are going to talk a little bit about this concept of leadership energy. So we're going to create some awareness of leadership energy for all of you that are leaders in the fire service. So I like to start this off because if there's anybody, and you'll see as we go through the presentation, if there's anybody who thinks that they can't make a difference, it's like that old saying: if you think you're too small to make a difference, try being stuck in a tent with a single mosquito. But John F. Kennedy really put it well and said, one person can make a difference and everyone should try. And if you can remember that concept throughout this webinar, you'll have an understanding of how you can create some influence moving forward. So Chief Jones, thank you very much for that introduction about me. Generally speaking, what is my background? I'm a director of emergency management. I'm a civil engineer by profession, spent the first half of my career working on infrastructure across Western Canada. From there, that spun off into me becoming a USAR structure specialist, doing some training at a NASA base with the US Army Corps of Engineers, and also becoming a firefighter, a 1006 technical rescuer in a number of disciplines, from swift water to rope, livestock rescue, grain rescue, structural collapse, things like that. Fortunately, I live near the Rocky Mountains, so I get the opportunity to hike them lots. And then seeing the need for empathetic leadership in areas in which I worked, I went off and pursued my certification and became a certified professional coach, so working in leadership. And when we talk about this energy leadership concept, you'll hear me speak about the Energy Leadership Index. I'm a master practitioner, able to deliver that to people as well. So when we talk about leadership, we tend to think of leaders as politicians, executives, chiefs, directors, or officers, particularly in the fire service. However, what I'm going to argue for you is that anybody who interacts with people on a regular basis is exhibiting leadership. And anybody can benefit from the effectiveness of upping their leadership style. So if you're a parent, you're a peer, you're a first responder, you're anybody who's doing something with the community, you're an entrepreneur, you're a coach, maybe you coach a local sports team, you're a consultant, you're a relationship partner, you're an administrator, any of those people are leaders. So leadership is really about how we interact with everyone and how we motivate ourselves and others to perform. So at the end of the day, those who don't really think of themselves as leaders have a tendency to limit their performance, their success, and their satisfaction. So why is that important? When we look at public safety personnel as a whole, we have a turnover rate of 36%. The national average is 10% for all industries. So we're 3 times the national average, and we're 12 times the high performer average. 85% of first responders have reported that they've experienced symptoms of stress related to their work. Now, stress shows up as poor satisfaction, low levels of engagement, lackluster recruitment and retention challenges, which results in low team cohesion and team environment. On the flip side, though, we know that team member satisfaction comes from being connected to a vision that aligns with our personal values. So as leaders, it's important for us to figure out how we can value our people and connect them overall to our organizational mission and what we're trying to accomplish. And so that's where that power of leadership and the power of emotional intelligence really comes in. So first off, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about stress. So I mentioned that 85% of first responders report feeling impacts of stress. So what stress is, it's this normal physiological response to stimuli, and it disrupts our homeostatic state. So in other words, it knocks us off our normal, and it causes physiological, psychological, or physical strain of some sort. So if we think about the way that our brains evolved for our ancestors, you see that saber-toothed tiger there. So we're in our cave. All of a sudden, the hair on our arms stands up, maybe on the back of our neck. We get this weird feeling in the pit of our stomach because we've detected an existential threat. There's a saber-toothed tiger prowling outside the cave. So what happens there is we get flooded with cortisol. And this cortisol acts like an early warning system for our bodies. It alerts us to a threat, and it lets us know. It's like the alarm system in the house saying there's an intruder there. Now, the problem with cortisol is it's just the alarm system. It can't motivate any behavior or push anything forward. So then what we need is we need a dump of adrenaline into our body. That's what allows us. So if we think about the fight or flight mode, that's what allows us to have the energy so that we can run away from the saber-toothed tiger, or we can fight it for a little while. The problem with that in terms of brain evolution is that our brain has not evolved to recognize that somebody being mad at us or being socially excluded is not the same survivalistic existential threat that the saber-toothed tiger was for our ancestors. So what happens as social animals when we feel unsupported? So maybe I find out on social media that a group of my friends went out for dinner and they didn't invite me. And 20 years ago, I wouldn't have known they went out for dinner and didn't invite me because I didn't have social media. But now I do. Instinctively, deep in that primitive part of my brain, I get this sense of dread. I get this sense of feeling excluded, and I experience stress. I get a dump of cortisol. I may get a dump of adrenaline. So when we understand that these are normal things that happen to us, we can actually start to alleviate some of the shame we feel around feeling stress, and we can start to figure out how to deal with it. The more we can lessen the stress we feel in our life, the more satisfied we become. So that's what brings me into the topic of today's talk, which is speaking about emotional intelligence. So what, by definition, is emotional intelligence? Psychologist Daniel Goleman defined it as the ability to recognize our own feelings and those of others, to motivate ourselves, and to handle our emotions well, to have the best for ourselves and our relationships. So that's a very interesting, broad definition of what emotional intelligence means. We can recognize our own feelings. We can recognize the feelings of others. As I mentioned in the leadership spot, we can motivate ourselves and others, and we can handle our emotions well. And we're going to talk about how to do that. So Goleman stipulated that there were 5 core components to emotional intelligence. Number 1 being empathy. And what you see here is the descriptor, I sense your pain. So empathy is being able to feel the emotions of others, understand the emotions of others. Number 2, effective communication. I possess strong social skills. So can I communicate how I'm feeling? Can I ask somebody how they're feeling? Can I recognize the cues in somebody? So maybe using empathy, I can recognize that somebody is hurting and now is not the appropriate time to crack an inappropriate joke. Maybe now is the time to just hold a little space for them. Self-awareness. I recognize my own feelings. This one's fairly self-explanatory. However, if any of you have ever seen Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart or read it, she has a Netflix special on it. She talks about the average American can only identify that they are feeling 3 emotions: happy, mad, and sad. Now, one of the tools I have and one of the tools I share with people, there's actually an emotion wheel that breaks it down far more than that. So we can start to recognize our own feelings. Happy, mad, and sad are great surface level ones, but there's usually something underlying. So can we start to recognize our own feelings? Those with high emotional intelligence can. Can I self-regulate? So this goes back to that handle our emotions well piece of the definition. So can I act and react appropriately? I'm going to talk about how thoughts, emotions, and actions are all connected. And so we'll talk about how to do that and gain some awareness around it. And then finally, that motivation. Am I driven to improve? Am I driven to improve myself and others? Those are the 5 core components that Goleman stipulates of emotional intelligence. So I mentioned this leadership energy and energy leadership concept. So let's talk about how energy ties into emotional intelligence. So if you can bear with me, I am going to make a stipulation that is based both in science, but also a little bit based in maybe something that's a little woo-woo if you want. But I'm going to say that I think everything in the universe is comprised of energy. Light is energy, sound is energy, physical objects are comprised of energy. So when you start to think that everything is comprised of energy, we start to understand the impact, that motivation and that influence that we have on everything around us. So generally speaking, there are 2 types of energy I want you to consider. There's catabolic energy and anabolic energy. Catabolic energy is by nature a destructive, tearing down force. It's like the breakdown of muscles to grow them back up. Catabolic energy consumes. It does serve a purpose to fuel our short-term action, but it's not to our long-term benefit. Cortisol and adrenaline, those stress hormones I talked about, are both catabolic by nature. They tear down, they fuel short-term action, but they're ultimately destructive in the long term. On the other side, though, we have anabolic energy. Now, anabolic energy is this constructive, building up, growth-oriented energy. It fuels growth, and in the long term, that's what serves us best. So if we think about energy as a continuum, where we have all these different energy levels, and the way I like to say it is we're vibrating at different frequencies, we can break it down into 7 different levels. Each level, if you look from the center out of this circle, has a core thought, a core feeling or emotion, and an action or a result. So this is where I mentioned that our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions are intrinsically linked. So at the center of the circle here, we see a focus on self. We see very catabolic energy. At the outside of the circle, and you can see it kind of on the bottom, it talks about self-transcendence. So we move through these levels of self-mastery and we start to transcend. We become greater about the whole. And I'm going to break down each of those 7 levels of energy in greater detail for you. We're going to talk about the thoughts, the emotions, and the actions that go with each of those 7 levels. But if you can think about that, we've got catabolic energy, constructive, tearing down. We've got anabolic energy, growth-oriented, healing, fueling energy. We can see there, catabolic energy really lives in that dark blue circle in the middle, where we're really focused on ourself. When we start to focus on others and the whole, we start to become more anabolic. And by nature, we actually start to grow. So when we can do this, this is an interesting way of breaking down some of Goleman's concepts of emotional intelligence. So let's start off by talking about the lowest level of catabolic energy. And before I talk about the 7 levels of energy in detail, I want you to understand no level of energy is bad. No level is worse than others. We can choose them at will. And the more we have access, the more emotional intelligence we create, the more we have access to choose any level of energy at will, so that we can choose the appropriate action in every situation that we're experiencing. So if we start with level one is the idea you may hear somebody say, I can't do this. I call it turtle. The core thought here is I'm a victim. The world is happening to me. Things are happening and I cannot control them. The emotion that results from that is apathy. We do nothing. Like a turtle who detects a threat, we withdraw into our shell. The action or the result out of that is actually no action at all. It's like our predecessors who detected the saber-toothed tiger, they got afraid and they just stayed in the cave and cowered in the corner. They were experiencing a level 1 reaction, withdrawing from the threat that was presented to them. Now, level 1 energy has a purpose, and that's why I like to refer to it as turtle. The turtle shell protects it. Level 1 energy protects us from the things that are happening that we cannot control. So if we cannot control what's happening in our life, if we cannot control the stressor that is coming at us, if I cannot control that my friends all went out for dinner and didn't invite me, I'm still going to feel the stress. But level 1 energy allows me to reflect upon it. It protects me from harm, but it doesn't allow me to go anywhere, just like a turtle inside its shell. So that's where level 2 energy comes in. Level 2 energy is characterized by conflict. This is the adrenaline level of energy. This is where adrenaline is associated. This is where you might hear somebody say, I win, you lose. It's me against you. It's me against the world. It's us against the world. What you see here, the core thought, is conflict. The core emotion coming out of that is anger. And the action or the result is typically defiance or conflict or fighting or motivated type action. So this is where our ancestors now say, you know what? I can't stay in this cave forever. I can't stay. I'll die if I stay in here. I need food. I need water. I need to leave. I need to run away from the tiger, or I need to fight the tiger. This motivates action. Level 2 energy can motivate action in the short term. And it's a great thing. It's what allows us to get stuff done. If there's anybody on this call who has ever said, I work well under pressure, and leaves it to the very last minute, like you submit your assignment that's due at midnight at 11:55 p.m., that's level 2 energy at work for you. So it serves a purpose too. There are times when level 2 energy is the most appropriate response to a situation. However, level 2 energy is draining in the long term. It's still catabolic energy. So if we operate on level 2 all the time, so if I'm moving from deadline to deadline to deadline to deadline, I'm going to burn myself out. So what we want to do is we want to figure out how we can move ourselves into a level of energy that's a little more anabolic. So that's where we get to level 3. And before some or most of you joined, we were having a little bit of a chat about the different weather across the country. And Chief Jones made the comment. He said, well, it is what it is. It's winter in Canada and it's spring in Canada. It is what it is. This is acceptance. This is the level of level 3 energy. Here we're taking responsibility for our own actions. We're understanding that we can't control the actions of others. The core emotion associated with this is forgiveness. And as a result, we tend to cooperate. Now, level 3 energy is the energy level you can live in forever. This is the energy level where it is fine. The F word comes up. Fine. I'm fine. You're fine. Everything's fine. It's good. It's good. It's okay. But it's really not good, because what we're doing is we're sweeping all that level 1 and 2 energy under the rug. We're not dealing with it. We're just ignoring it. And that allows us to do that. This is the level of tolerance. This is the level of compromise. This is the level that exists in a lot of organizational settings. There are people I don't particularly like working with. but I have to work with them. So I'm going to work with them. I don't enjoy it, but I'm going to do it. There are people who don't want to grow. They don't want to change. They're perfectly happy doing the same thing they've done. And that's okay for them if it works for them and if they're satisfied doing that. But that's a lot of this level 3 energy. So level 3 is a very interesting one before I move to level 4, because it's a mix of catabolic and anabolic. It's more anabolic than catabolic. So it's more growth oriented. But because it's that mix, it's kind of like sitting on the fence. It's that teeter-totter between catabolic and anabolic energy. And as I mentioned, if we're sweeping things under the rug, we're not actually dealing with them. We're not making them go away, which means they persist. The stressor persists. It keeps coming back. So while we can live here indefinitely, it's not necessarily the best place for a lot of us to live if we want to go on and achieve things and have satisfaction in many areas of our life. So now we start to talk about the levels of pure anabolic energy. Level 4. This is this level where we see volunteerism. We see caring, kindness, compassion. The core thought is concern for others. We get this emotion of compassion. I feel for others. And the action or the result that comes out of it is service. So level 4 sounds great. Lots of people are like, man, I want to be level 4 energy all the time. This is great. This is great. It's not completely and totally interactive vocally, of course, but I would ask typically, and I'd be like, what happens here? And people be like, oh man, I give, and then I burn out. See, and that's the disadvantage to level 4 energy. People with a lot of level 4 energy or who are experiencing level 4 energy really have a hard time drawing boundaries. It becomes a challenge for them to draw boundaries, and they can overgive. Level 4 is the level where we feel good when we can help people solve problems. But if we can help people solve problems, that means they come to us with problems. And if they come to us with their problems and we solve their problems for them, they're not solving their own problems, which might allow them to continue to exist in whatever different level of energy they're experiencing. And so this is this idea that while it's anabolic and it's growth oriented, we have to be careful because too much of it can also be harmful to us. And so it's this mix and this continuum of all the different levels of energy. Then we go to level 5. Level 5 is this idea that there is opportunity everywhere. So if level 3 is, it is what it is, level 5 is, it is what it is. It's what it's supposed to be. It's what it's meant to be. And I will find the way to take what I need out of that and the way to make my place in the world out of that. I have a purpose, and I have to figure out what my purpose is in relation to what's going on. So the core thought here in level 5 energy is reconciliation. That piece of it is what it is at level 3 versus it is what it is. That understanding that things are as they are supposed to be. The emotion that results from that is peace. When we do energy work, when we do leadership work, when I talk to people in group settings or individually, ultimately I ask people, what do you really want to feel? What do you want to feel most? And generally people say, I want to feel joy. I want to feel peace. I want to feel happy. I want to feel satisfied. Level 5 is a really great level that we can tap into that allows us to do this because we get acceptance. We understand that the world is the way it is because it's the way it should be. Now, one of the downfalls, because there's a downfall to every level of energy, of level 5, is that because opportunity is everywhere, we can sometimes experience paralysis by analysis. So I use the example of I go to a restaurant, they put a menu in front of me, and 30 of my favorite food items are on the menu. And suddenly I'm stunned. And to be honest, I drop into a level 1 catabolic stress reaction because I'm overwhelmed. There are too many things to do, too many things to choose from, so I can't pick one. So then I end up picking chicken fingers and fries, which isn't even on my, favorite level of things to eat. Or I can bounce back and I can say, hey, you know what? This is a cool opportunity. I can't decide the one that I want to pick, but I'm going to try this one because I feel like this tonight. And that's where we tap into level 6 energy. Level 6 energy is in the zone, the level of click, the level of flow. This is a level of intuition. So this is the spot where I get overwhelmed when I have all the menu options in front of me. I get paralyzed. I can't make a decision. I come back and I'm like, you know what? What do I feel like? What do I really just feel like? And I go with it, that level of intuition. And so here I get this core thought of synthesis. Everything is connected. Everything is happening the way that it's supposed to. My core emotion is joy. So I talked about joy, peace, happiness in level 5. You see level 5 and 6 incorporate a lot of this synthesis and this joy. And the action or the result that comes out of that is wisdom. So when I refer to level 6 as being in the zone or in flow, think about a thing you do where when you're doing it, time melts away. It might be your job. It might be spending time with your family. It might be something that you do. It might even be that you sat down, you really felt motivated by something. You sat down, you did some work, you did a whole bunch of work. You did 2 hours worth of work. You were like insanely productive. And you're like, okay, the day's gone now. And you look up and it's been half an hour. That's level 6 energy. We all have it. We all have the ability to access it. You just have to find your spot. And it's unique and individual to all of us. And then there's level 7 energy. Level 7 energy is that ultimate outside circle of self-transcendence, where we're all about others. We're all about the collective whole. And here there are no limits. There is no judgment, none at all. We have absolute passion, and we get the ability to create and co-create our lives exactly the way we want them to be. Now, the downfall to level 6 and 7 energy, if we're experiencing them, is we're probably really disconnected from everybody else because we're so in the zone in level 6. We're so focused on what we're doing. This is that thing where you are so engrossed in what you're doing and somebody says something to you and you're like, huh, what? What were you talking about? Level 7 is kind of this saints and gurus type level. This might be the level where we experience when we're meditating, when we're walking, when we're doing something that brings us that absolute passion, where we don't judge anything. Meditation, we're sitting there and a thought pops into our head, we get monkey brain, and we say, hi, thought. Thanks for being here. We don't force it out. We don't push it. That's experiencing that level 7. That's that walking down the street and looking at the blossoms on the trees in some parts of the country at this time of year and going, wow, that's nice. It's a sense of awe and wonderment and connection. So those are the 7 levels of energy. Each has their advantages and disadvantages. We have the ability to tap into them. And we have the ability to do this. One is not better than the other. The most common thing we see when we're teaching this concept, when we're talking about levels of energy, when we're talking about emotional intelligence, is people like, I want to be level 7 all the time. If you were level 7 all the time, you wouldn't exist. You'd be ethereal. It's when can you tap into it? And the more you have the ability to tap into level 6, level 7, level 5 energy, the more you have the opportunity to choose the level of energy below that is appropriate for the situation. I will be dead honest with you. There are some situations when level 6 or 7 energy is not the approach. Sometimes it takes level 2 or level 3 energy to approach a situation. But it's about being able to choose our thoughts and to choose our actions in the moment. And that's why this all ties back in. This is the core tenet of emotional intelligence, our ability to recognize our own emotions and then to act appropriately. So how do we measure this? How do we measure these 7 levels of energy? I mentioned in my introduction slide, the Energy Leadership Index Assessment. So the Energy Leadership Index Assessment is an assessment, not a test, that talks about the different levels of energy you experience from your perspective. This is a thing that you can do that shows what level of energy you're experiencing based on the lenses, the filters, and the perceptions you've developed throughout your entire life. Now, why is this important? It's important because, as you can see here in this chart, people who experience a lot of catabolic energy in their life, generally speaking, have a E factor, an energy leadership factor, below 2.5. So very catabolic, very much a lot of level 1 and level 2 energy in their life. Report very low levels of satisfaction in all of these areas of life. They report not being satisfied with their communication, not being satisfied with health and wellness, not being satisfied with personal or work relationships. On the flip side, people who have higher anabolic energy report being considerably more satisfied in every different area of life that you see there. Better work-life balance, better work relationships, more satisfied with their productivity, their feeling of personal freedom, and their leadership ability. More satisfied with their intimate relationships, more satisfied with family relationships, and more engaged in feeling a better level of energy at work. So what that boils down to is we see that people who can move from slightly catabolic, just under a score of 3 on the assessment, to just over a score of 3, report 2 times more satisfaction in all of those areas of life. So as we can increase our emotional intelligence, which allows us to choose our thoughts and choose our actions, which helps inform our emotions, we can become more satisfied with what we're doing in life. So now the studies all show, there's lots of replication studies and data, hundreds of thousands of these assessments have been done globally. We see that 75% of female clients who take the ELI assessment and then work with a professional coach to work on their improvement and change their level of consciousness to increase their emotional intelligence, report going from moderately catabolic to moderately anabolic. 69% of male clients do the same thing. So what we see here is this opportunity where we're seeing that 7 in 10 people, or better than 7 in 10 people, when working and when put into a framework where they have the opportunity to say, hey, I'm not really satisfied with this area of my life. I'd like to work on this. I want to become more emotionally intelligent. When they do that, 7 in 10 people do. Now, you're all here because this is the first step. This is the first step in understanding and awareness so that you can move forward and you can start to recognize how you can increase your level of emotional intelligence as a person, as a leader, as a peer, as a partner, whatever it is that you fill, whatever role it is that you fill in your life and whatever is important to you. So when we talk about the fire service, we're going to talk about the fact that we work as teams. A lot of this stuff is very individualized. Okay, so I can go and be an individual and I can increase my emotional intelligence and I can feel better about my day-to-day life, and that's great. But when we come into a team environment, it's absolutely critical for the team to be operating on the same page. So I'm going to lead you through a few things. So J. Richard Hackman did a study, started in 1983, has been updated continually since with research. It actually started out as 5 conditions of a high-performing team. You now see that it's 6, which is what has come from his research updates throughout. So the first condition of a high-performing team, in order to be a team and not just a group of people, you need to be interdependent, bounded, and stable. What does that mean? That means that the team relies upon each other for success. If somebody on the team fails, the team is at risk of failure. Also, the team is clear. The team isn't changing. It's not bouncing around. It's not shifting. And it's stable. As soon as you introduce a new team member to a team, the team has changed. So if we think about that in terms of a department, maybe the department has platoons. Maybe you've got a truck crew or an engine crew. As soon as somebody cycles out off of that crew, that's a new crew. That's a new team. So things have changed. The conditions have changed. So, of course, the team's performance would be expected to be impaired. But if you can circle back to that individual level of energy piece and that emotional intelligence piece, you can start to ask inquisitive questions. You can be like, wait, the team performed really well last shift, but we're not performing quite as well this shift. Things seem a little bit off. We can approach that instead of with judgment, we can approach it with curiosity. So if we understand that teams have to be interdependent, bounded, and stable in order to be high performing, that's the first key element. The second element that Hackman stipulates or postulates is that a high performing team must have a clear, compelling direction. So think all the way back to the start of this presentation when I talked about we know that team member satisfaction comes from being connected to organizational values as well as feeling valued as a person. You need to have a clear and compelling direction for your team. A clear direction is one thing. Everybody knows it. But if your team members don't agree with it, if it doesn't fit with their own personal values, it's not going to be compelling for them. I see this a lot. I work in a lot of organizations where people are highly motivated to do great work. They're doing amazing things, and the organizational direction is different. And that's disenfranchising for them. It's demoralizing. It puts them in a spot where they recognize that their individual connection to the greater whole is broken. It's not there. And so team performance suffers and individual satisfaction suffers. So if we can recognize that a team has to be interdependent, bounded, and stable, and it has to have a clear, compelling direction, as leaders, we can do that. We can ask our teams, what is it that motivates you? What is it that you would like to be here for? We can try to figure out if there are ways in which we can incorporate that. I'm not saying flex to it, because then we're everywhere. Then we don't have a clear direction, because now the direction is trying to accommodate everybody. But instead, what we can say is this is the clear direction, and this is how it connects to you as an individual. Number 3, the team is comprised of the right people. This is a pretty straightforward one. If you've got the wrong people on the team, your team is not going to perform well. So if we use a football analogy, or we could use a hockey analogy even, if we've got a team that is nothing but goal scorers, nobody's passing anybody the puck. Nobody's back checking. Nobody's playing defense. We're probably not going to have a successful team. We're going to have a great team of all-stars, a great team of individuals, but not a team that's high performing, because we don't have the right people to fill the right roles, which ties into solid team structure. The team has to have a structure where everybody understands their role, but also, back to number 2, feels compelled and motivated in their role. What we see often in terms of high performing teams that start to drop to less high performing or just normal performing teams is often what's happening is somebody wants more, but they feel stuck. And they start to experience that catabolic energy, those level 1, 2, and 3 reactions, and it pulls the team down. So we want a solid team structure that's comprised of the right people. And then important for everybody who's a senior officer or an administrator or anything on this call, we have to have supportive organizational context. People need to understand that when they have a clear, compelling direction, we put the right people on the team, we give the team a good structure, the team doesn't change. We have to have an organizational context that supports them. If we as leaders are saying one thing and our team is reading in the newspaper that the leadership at our level or above our level is saying or doing something else, they're not going to feel that they have a supportive organizational context. And circling back to that feeling unsupported piece, that creates a stress reaction for people. If I feel as though my superiors do not support me, that is the same social reaction for me as if I find out that a bunch of my friends went out to dinner and excluded me, which from a primitive brain perspective makes us think that we are at risk of dying, social death, physical death. We're not at the risk of dying. When somebody laughs at us, we're not going to die. When somebody doesn't like us, we're not going to die. But our brain doesn't know that. So we want to understand, particularly as leaders, that it's important all the way up and down the chain that there's a supportive organizational context for the direction that the team is going. And these were Hackman's initial 5 conditions for high-performing teams. With the increase in coaching, executive coaching, life coaching, health coaching, all these different areas of coaching that have come through, as Hackman's been continuing to do his research, he added a 6th one. And that was access to competent or expert team coaching. Now, this does not mean having an external coach all the time. It may mean having an external coach to help the team get to a point to make sure that it has all of these conditions to be high performing. But any good leadership and team coach, their job is actually to coach themselves out of a job. Their job is to help coach the team on how to self-coach. And that ties back into emotional intelligence. Where is everybody at in terms of being able to understand their own emotions and those of others? Where is everybody at in terms of being able to have communication and conversations about the things that matter? When things are difficult, can it be done in a framework that allows everybody to feel included, allows everyone to feel valued, and allows the team to get to the resolution of what the issue is? Nothing is ever perfect. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. It's the opportunity for the team to right itself. Now, teams that are really struggling or teams that are kind of stuck in that level 3, man, it's okay, we're fine, we're getting by, it's fine. Those teams may benefit from an external coach working with them, somebody who can facilitate the growth. But as they move more into those other levels of energy, as they increase their emotional intelligence as individuals and a collective, the team starts to be able to coach itself. So those are Hackman's 6 high-performing team conditions. And it's really applicable for us in the fire service because that's the environment we work in. So when we talk about coaching and the benefits of coaching, a lot of people say, what does this look like? And I won't spend too much time on this slide because actually we're just about done and then we're going to get to questions so that anybody who needs to leave on the hour is still going to get a chance to get some questions in, and anybody who wants to stay past can ask some questions and we'll go from there. But there are surveys measuring the impact. The ROI on coaching in an executive or a leadership or a team environment is very clear. Over 500% return on investment, 5-to-1 return on investment for executive coaching. That's where a coach works one-on-one with the leader of a team. Almost 800% return on investment when we factor in the financial benefits of employee retention. So if you go all the way back to the start in that little animated slide at the start that talked about low team cohesion results in lackluster recruitment and poor retention, if we can take our turnover from 36% in public safety and drop it to 20%, we have significant benefits. I probably don't need to tell the group on this call the challenges that are associated with having people off on short-term or long-term leave, on having people retire from the profession because they're experiencing the stress, because 85% of us are. So this is the opportunity for us to make a real difference. And then when we don't have people off on leave, we don't have vacancies, we don't have gaps, we have stable, high-performing teams. Because when we lose one person off that team, our team just changed. It's no longer a high-performing team. And it's got to do all that work again to get back to where it was. And then Manchester Consulting shows here, you see 67%. 67% of people who have team or executive coaching report that they've experienced improved teamwork, stakeholder relationships, and reporting relationships. So their work relationships. So that ties in very, very closely. This is completely independent, but it ties in very closely with the statistics that come out of the Energy Leadership Index assessment results, where I said 7 in 10 people report being more satisfied after working with a coach, either as an individual or a team. So as we circle back and we think about emotional intelligence as individuals, if we think about ourselves as leaders, every single one of us is a leader. Elevating our level of consciousness, increasing our emotional intelligence, allows us to choose our reactions to modern day stressors, understanding that there's parts of our brain that we cannot control, and that we cannot control the stressors that will happen. What that does for us, it increases our satisfaction, it helps us have better performance, and it helps us have better satisfaction with our relationships, whether they're personal, intimate, or work relationships. And it generates investment, a return on investment, well over 500%. So everybody on this call, and I'm going to tell you, everybody you work with is a leader. So if we can consider that, we can look at this quote by John Quincy Adams and understand that our actions can inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more. That's what makes us leaders. I'm going to throw this up here, this last piece, before I open it up for questions. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can certainly find my webpage. There's a QR code there. If you want to learn more about this, you want to work more on this, you want to understand how it can impact you, your leadership team, your department, or maybe you're like, you know what? Dave's talking about some stuff that I kind of really identify with, but I need it in my personal life. The beauty is there's a whole network of people out there that can help on that too. So that's how you can get in contact with me so that you can ask more questions you have that are applicable to you, your department, your team, your family members with respect to the concepts of emotional intelligence and energy leadership. And with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing, turn it back over to your lead moderators, and open it up for any questions that you might have for me.
To see if anyone has any specific questions for Dave. And Dave, thank you very much for the presentation. Lots of great information there for sure. One thing going up here is, how would you navigate the outspoken emotional leeches or energy vampires on the team? And I like thanks for the question and the framing, Kim, because I think that it's a very real question that we face. So, Dave, that's a question from Kim.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And so when we start to look at this, of course, everybody always wants a silver bullet, right? We always want to just like snap our fingers and make problems go away, but that's not the way the world works. It's back to that approach of how can we approach it with some curiosity and some non-judgment. And so understanding that what is our approach we want to choose in that moment. So interestingly, if we circle it back to the piece, and I know this all sounds really soft, because guess what? It's human skills. They are soft. That's the whole point. But if we circle it back and, okay, we've got somebody who's a leech or an energy vampire, they're draining. They're probably experiencing a lot of that catabolic energy, and maybe not because of something at work, maybe because of something at work. But as leaders or as team members, if we can approach that with some compassion, then we can choose and we can say, hey, where are we at? Maybe I'm going to apply a level 4 lens to this right now. I'm going to be like, what's going on for you? What's happening? How can I help? Is there something I can do to help? That opportunity, because that allows us to choose our reaction, which brings up the energy. The one unfortunate thing that this doesn't, I don't want to gloss over this. We often think in organizational cultures that we can fix somebody who is detrimental to the culture by putting them with a team of high performers. And that's akin to putting a moldy grape in the batch of good grapes. The catabolic energy is more powerful than anabolic energy. And there are studies that show this. Jocko Willink talks about it in his book, talks about where with the Navy SEALs and the BUDS training, they took high performing teams and they took the leader from the high performing team and put them on the poor performing team. They took the leader from the poor performing team and put them on the high performing team. And you actually saw both teams come to normalize because the strong leaders brought the weaker performers up, but the poor leaders brought the good performers down. And so sometimes you just have to say, this is not an organizational or a cultural fit. But also, but if you can work through that with a little bit of compassion and empathy first and a little bit of curiosity, sometimes you might find out that somebody just really isn't feeling connected for whatever reason.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. Deb from Calgary says, super great presentation, Dave. Could you comment on the role of accountability in building high-performing teams, especially when there may be less than full commitment to the vision?
Oh, the role of accountability in building high-performing teams, especially when they're, yeah. So I think it's important for everybody to understand. So I'm a big fan of a book by Jim Collins, Good to Great. He did a few books on that, talking about organizational culture. And one of the metaphors or the analogies or the similes, I'm not sure which one it is, that he uses is you have to have the right people on the bus, but then you have to have the right people in the right seats, and people need to know where the bus is going. And so all of those things are really important. So accountability kind of comes all the way around. It's really incumbent upon any of us that are in senior leadership, for sure. If I say one thing and do another, my actions will speak louder than my words, for sure. So if I say it's important that our culture fits a certain way, but I allow whatever is counter to that or contrary to that culture to exist, I'm not exhibiting accountability. On the flip side, it's about creating a space where our teams can hold each other accountable too. And really back to those Hackman's 6 conditions, that competent and expert team coaching part, you want the team to be able to hold itself accountable. So when we're building the team, you really want to try and assess, are people aligning with your vision? Are you bringing on the right people who align with your vision and your mission? And then assess their performance as you go through, assess their fit. Really, a lot of it comes back to fit. And if maybe you've got somebody who's a really high performer, but not a cultural fit, you might need to figure out, is there an opportunity for them to do something, but not necessarily drag down that performance of the team? So that's a very complex and thorny one. And it's very deeply individualized. But if you lead with a little bit of curiosity first and setting the tone from the top, but setting it with respect to what your desired culture is.
Great question. Great answer. From Deborah, do you feel that our standard recruitment strategies serve to identify the right energies needed for high performance team development in the fire service? And I think they're looking for a very candid response on this one. We're in the safe cone of silence on this one.
The safe cone of, I don't know if there's such a thing as a safe cone of silence. I would say I've long held this belief, and I don't believe it's unique to the fire service, that we tend to promote based on tenure, or we tend to promote based on technical skills. And sometimes there are situations. I mean, when we're in collective bargaining agreement situations, for example, there are areas where that's kind of it's kind of a necessary thing, or it's the way it was structured. And that's not to denigrate that. That's just understanding a circumstance. But we'll take the very best performer, technical performer, and we'll make them the leader of the team. And now their job is to do paperwork and reporting and to not actually do the technical stuff anymore. And they're flipping miserable. They're just absolutely beside themselves because they don't get to have fun anymore. They're not doing what they're best at. And you took the best one off the team. And so now the team suffers as a result. So really back to that is, I think, and I'm seeing a shift in it, certainly, but if we can start to recruit based on that idea of cultural fit, whatever our culture is, pick it. If you can start to recruit based on the idea of cultural fit because you can teach technical skills, then that's a way where we can start to see higher performing teams. With the caveat that, of course, if somebody's not picking up the technical skills, well, they're not, like, they have to be able to do their job too. They just can't be the greatest person ever. Some of the hardest discussions I've ever had from an HR perspective in my life were with the person who was wonderful for morale and also terrible for morale, because everybody loved them, but everybody also saw that they couldn't do their job. And those were hard ones to have because they were great people, but they need to go succeed somewhere else. And so generally speaking, it's that piece. Can we get back to culture? And I'm seeing a bit of a shift there, as what I'm observing going around. Just as these things start to be, these are all really new concepts in the last 20 years where we're starting to think about this. And we even see it with this program, for example, the great work being done by the CAFC in terms of bringing this type of stuff out to our fire service members.
Yeah, great question, and challenging to answer that one too, Dave, just because we have such a wide swath of composition within the fire service across Canada. We have our volunteer departments, we have our part-time or composite departments, and then career. And as you alluded to, certainly sometimes that collective agreement component that speaks to the promotional piece and the energies in that piece, but how you recruit may differ from one situation to another, for many different reasons, and checking a box is no longer an option if you're truly looking for a high performing team. And having one versus saying you have one, I think, are two very different things as well. Not seeing any other questions in the chat at this point, and I apologize, I can't see everyone. Is there any hands up? Is there any hands up specifically for questions or comments at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing anything right now, but there was an anonymous question that we received. If we want to work on improving our EI, what is the first thing we need to do?
Oh, if we want to work on improving our EI, I think you just did it. So when we talk about understanding our emotional intelligence, our emotional quotient, our leadership skills as leaders, one of the first, so I talk about, it's kind of a 3-step process, and coaching works with people on this. First, you have to have awareness. So you have awareness. So you've done that. You've created some level of awareness. So that's, I'm going to read a book. I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to join a webinar. I'm going to go to a speaker at a conference who's going to present some information that I can then digest. That's the first step. The next step after that is acknowledgement. So now we actually have to say, okay, what can I actually do with that information? And sometimes we're in the position where we are well set up. We've got the functional skills. Maybe we've got good emotional intelligence. We've got good communication skills, and we can apply that to our lives. But sometimes we can't. I'm like, it doesn't really fit. I tried it. I went out and everybody just looked at me like I had 3 eyes, and they didn't quite understand what was going on. So that's where then leaning into somebody who has that expertise, who can help facilitate that growth, is important. And whether that's a mental health provider, a therapist, a psychologist, a counselor, a professional coach, more leadership training or workshops, things where you actually get to exercise. Because the first piece, the awareness, is a thought experiment. And then just like any technical training we do in the fire service, right? We talk about it technically, We show them, we do it, we let them do it, and then repetition. So it's that same piece. So that's that acknowledgement piece that ties into action. So we have awareness, acknowledgement, and action. And so then we start to live it and we start to do the things we've learned based on the tools and techniques that we've been coached or advised on by the person who's helping us work through it. So you've taken the first step for sure. That's why I enjoy being able to give these, because it puts it out there. It gives you something to think about. And then anybody who wants to take those next steps, those are the next steps, is to reach out particularly to somebody who works in this kind of arena and does this sort of thing.
Yeah, excellent answer. And I think, very candidly for everyone on here, I think we're all very aware that the emotional intelligence piece is far more significant than simply an hour presentation, especially with such a complex fire service. But certainly the generalized overview and the high level piece that you've given is given a lot of people lots of fodder to certainly consider and to move forward. There's another question here, Dave, from Deb in Calgary. Hey, Dave, have you ever participated in EI screening? I'm sure there are many. However, what do empathetic people tend to score poorly on in these, and the cold and confident score well? Question mark.
So with the exception of a few, I've done the majority of the personality / screening type. Fortunately, I've never had to do a psychological screening to get a job. So, which probably says more about my employer than anything. They back to that recruitment question. One of the things I will say about the Energy Leadership Index assessment is it's an attitudinal assessment. And so it's a great tool that can be used to see how people are approaching situations. It's one of the top 10. Actually, like Forbes had it as their number 3 of assessments. There's a whole bunch that are out there. Of course, lots of us know Myers-Briggs, the personality type, the 16 personalities, which they kind of have this fixed mindset to them. And they leave people going, well, this is who I am. Whereas Clifton Strengths is another really good one that's out there that talk about the strengths you have as an individual or the way that you view the world now. So what's interesting in terms of scoring on the assessments is, and back to that ELI piece, is when I do these debriefs and assessments for people, I remind them that their score is simply just a point in time count. It's not like a grade on an exam. And really the whole point of having that is, if you came to me as a coach and said, hey, I want to work with you as a coach because I want to become more satisfied in this area of my life, or I want to become better at this thing, I want to be able to look at where you are now. And then when we go through the whole coaching program, I want to be able to look at where you are after and see if you actually recognized the change that you wanted to recognize. So back to that was a lot of preamble to the question of where do empathetic people score poorly and the cold and confident score well. When your screenings are based on technical skill versus cultural fit, you're going to see differences, because you might see somebody who's soft, who, just like me, didn't really answer the question all that directly. It took me a really long time to get to answering it because I felt that there was an essay question required as opposed to a multiple choice type question. One of my favorite books, I got a bookshelf behind me there with books on it. One of my favorite books is called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who's a psychologist who did the entrance exams for the Israeli Defense Force. So the IDF in Israel, he was the one who was supposed to come up with their psychological screening for hiring IDF people. So he writes some fascinating things about human and cognitive biases. Really, at the end of the day, is if we're screening people, it's again back to fit, and it's soft. It's hard to quantify. And so when we quantify things, that's kind of where we automatically are excluding those people who may score more empathetically or emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence is a hard one to manage. Or quantify. And that's been one of the big knocks on the term emotional intelligence for many years, is we can do IQ tests. We can test standardized intelligence. But when it comes to emotional intelligence, it's so context dependent that it's hard to measure. And so really back to exactly what Chief Boissonneau said is we've got such a varied fire service across Canada, from small, very strictly volunteer departments with a pure volunteer chief to composite departments to full-time career departments. It's so hard to pick any one thing. You have to pick the thing that works for you and then screen based on that. That's the biggest thing I could say going forward is find the cultural fit you want and ask the questions that will help you assess that.
Yeah, great advice. What I can say is just one thing that's changed is, 26 years in the fire service, I can tell you that when our recruitment was being done, when I was first joining a volunteer department, it was, hey, are you interested in helping out? It had nothing to do with cultural fit or, dynamics within the community or anything of that nature. Did I have a pulse, and was I willing to work hard to try and help out my community? Whereas now I can say in Oakville, as part of our recruitment process, not only do all of our 3 deputies go through the entire hiring practice as far as interviewing, but then we have a behavioral assessment where we put them together amongst teams. Everyone says they can operate well in a team, but until you actually see it, sometimes they don't really show their true colors until they're there. And then we also do a psychological evaluation, which again it's very simplistic, and it's green or it's red, or there is a caution associated to it. But times have significantly changed, and I think that is probably a way a lot of career departments have gone, just because of issues with the Human Rights Tribunal and other things that have predicated the necessity. And I would say it's not necessarily a bad thing. We may have gotten into this for a challenging reason, but the fact that we're here isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. And that's a great add. And I will say one thing we've done, and that's also really easy and beneficial to do, is take your leaders who model the culture you want and have a coffee with that recruit, particularly maybe if you're looking at doing promotional type stuff, because there's the formal interview process. And then there's the kind of the informal. That's something that we've done a lot with candidates coming into our organization, particularly our full-time staff, is they go through the interview process. We're like, yeah, we'd like to talk to this. Like, this is the person we think we're going to go with. And you go have a coffee chat. Or the pickup truck drive is always a fun one. Not that we can do that, but as the saying goes, if you can spend 3 hours in a pickup truck with somebody, you can probably work with them and get along well with them. And so some of those informal add-ons work well. I know lots of programs are going to, recruit programs where recruits are coming in and getting to see crews that are working on the floor and getting to meet them versus isolating them. That's certainly a shift we made in our department. They'd come in, they'd do all their 1001 training and everything, and then they'd get turned out loose on the floor, and they'd never really met anybody from the floor before. Now it's a full integration all the way through, because that cultural fit's really important. So there's a good combination. You'll see different things all the way along. But sometimes just sitting down and having a good conversation about where somebody's at and what they're hoping for is a really good way to figure out their fit.
Yeah, excellent, Dave. And there's lots of compliments in the chat based upon a great presentation and great session. You did mention something that spurred a question that I had, is that you mentioned it's hard, EI is hard to measure. How do you know when people are improving, when there is that challenge of not being able to quantify or exactly measure, and what do you watch or look for?
Yeah, so generally speaking, this is why I like the energy leadership concept. And so I I've been looking at getting my coaching certification for over a decade, and I couldn't find the program that fit right. That's the thing. When I talk about fit's not always just about the person coming in, right? Like, it's got to be about the organization they're coming into. And so this is the one that really resonated with me and going through that program. So for everybody on this call, if you can just recognize, hey, these are levels of energy, don't put labels on them. We don't need to put labels. We don't need to be like, geez, you know what? That was a really level 4 response. But just look at it and say, okay, what's going on right now? So one of the things we teach is when we experience something and we're curious, or we're experiencing a stressor, first step, stop. Second step, breathe. Don't combine the two steps. Don't stop breathing. But stop, take a breath, and then ask yourself, what's going on for me? What's going on for me right now? And then you choose your reaction appropriately. So when it comes back to that, how can we measure emotional intelligence in people? It's exactly that. So what is the conversation that we just had, or what is the interaction we just had, and how is that different? And does that fit with a more elevated level of thinking? Or is that person being really catabolic today? Like, did they have a conflict modality to them? And so, and why is that? Like, geez, that person's normally really affable, really kind, really outgoing, really compassionate. And that's really changed for them lately. And so then approaching that. So that's which increases our own emotional intelligence. I'm trying not to answer it as a sales pitch, Chief. So I mean, the beauty of the ELI is that's what I love about it is you can do that, and then at a point in time later you can do that again, and that's actually going to help you. While it's only one assessment, it's one of the ways you could measure your emotional intelligence. But it's also just that piece of observational. And so now understanding, oh, maybe, or somebody who was always really conflict oriented has really come around, and they're starting to be compassionate and helping, and they're being a bit more giving. Well, that's a good indication that they're accessing a different level, more anabolic level of energy. And so their emotional intelligence is increased. Their ability to recognize their own emotions and act appropriately has increased. I think the big thing is back to those 5 factors that I showed at the start. If you can even just look at somebody or yourself and say, am I more of this today than I was yesterday? The five characteristics of emotional intelligence that we talked about at the start.
Excellent. And I don't think anyone thought you were evading the question by any means. I think it's very symbolic to when you talk to a lawyer, as an example, and their answer is, it depends, because there is so much varying components associated to what you're speaking to, but so highly important. And I think some of those, even those little pieces, when you talk about the improvements in recognizing someone's improvements in EI, I think that's really important. And one final question, again, I'm not trying to manipulate the conversation, but I'm fascinated by this. I think it's such an important area. You know, we have certifications in sports, and as an example, you have to certify at all these levels, but yet emotional intelligence isn't necessarily part of a fire officer program, as an example. So I find this absolutely fascinating. Very simplistically, I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear how you frame it. Is EI consistent across all cultures?
Oh. No. Short answer is no. And the reality is because it's the expectation now. Now higher EI is going to be culture specific. And so do you fit into the culture? And so, for example, the way that if I was to deliver this training and this awareness to a different culture or to a different program or to a different group, obviously you notice there's some imagery in here that's very fire service specific. If I was delivering this to a group of teachers and educators, I would adapt it to make it specific to them. Now, I wouldn't be the appropriate one, to be honest, to deliver necessarily to that group. And that's even my own EI recognizing that I don't feel I would be. I think there are people who are more qualified to do that. So the interesting thing though is recognizing the cultural space you're in, and particularly, cultural is a big word there, Chief. So we can talk, human culture, but even just organizational culture, and that opportunity to recognize that the need for EI may be different. If you need 10 people in a small rural volunteer department, and you just need 10 because you need to be able to make it, sometimes that's what you've got to go with. But those 10 people probably all live in the community, so they probably have a really good idea of the community culture. And we shouldn't try and make that 10-person single station volunteer department in the middle of a rural area the same as one of our large metropolitan departments. And so recognizing that cultural fit, particularly if we're somebody who's moving around in fire service leadership, that would be a really big one. But generally speaking, it's the biggest thing about EI is if we can be aware of the cultural differences and then recognize that there are cultural differences.
Yeah, great point. I see Chief Jones is back. He had an MVC right out in front of his station and had to pull away for a few minutes, but he's back. I've certainly asked enough questions, but and I do have another meeting where I have some travel time where I'm not actually doing a virtual meeting, so I'm looking forward to that actually. So just you've had the attention of over 40 participants still to this point in time, Dave. So it speaks to obviously the excellent presentation that you've provided, and obviously it's been of great importance to everyone on the call. So for me personally, I just wanted to thank you before I exit. I'll turn it over to Chief Jones just to monitor any last things throughout the chat. But again, thank you so much for your presentation here today. Really, really inspiring and important, I think, for any of those who maybe didn't have a great understanding of what it was, and certainly how it's going to move forward. So great session.
Well, thank you, Chief, and safe travels off to your actual real in-person meeting.
Thank you.
Safe travels. And yeah, Dave, thank you very much for the session today. It's been truly inspiring to listen to the message. I know lots of folks have seen lots of really good comments in the background of what people have gotten out of it. Even though I had an event outside of my station, I was still able to hear what was going on in the headsets, but sorry I had to take off for a few moments. But thank you very much for your session. It's one of those things that quite often we take for granted as fire service leaders. We do it, but we forget about it. And sometimes when we're doing our fine planning, emotional intelligence is one of those things that we don't quite often think of. But with that, any last final comments or any last great points of wisdom you'd like to give our participants today before we go?
Oh boy, I feel like I've talked more than enough, Chief. So yeah, it's just that opportunity is. If anybody's ever watched Ted Lasso, that show, and it's kind of ironic because they very intentionally misquoted, they misattributed the quote to Walt Whitman, but that idea of being curious and not judgmental, that's the big piece.
Yeah.
And we often think about that for others, but I think more importantly, and I've certainly learned this throughout the entirety of my coaching journey, and this is something I struggled with personally for the first 4 decades of my life, is judging myself. And so if I could start to be more curious about myself and less judgmental, it's unbelievable how much less stress you experience. So that's that big piece is a little less judgment, a little more curiosity. Let's kind of go back to the way we thought when we were kids again, where we see the world with wonderment and awe. And if we see ourselves with wonderment and awe and recognize that we're perfect human beings exactly as we are with all of our flaws and all of our challenges, then that's a really great thing for us to learn. So that kind of be, it's the toughest one. It's the hardest one because we're all hard on ourselves.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Thank you very much for that. And you know what, your final last words are, it's awesome. It's awesome to think of being more inspired, and the point of being inspired from the information you gave today. Thank you on behalf of all of us at CFC and all of the participants today for the message you gave us. We truly appreciate it, Dave, and couldn't expect anything more. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity to be here and just to be able to ramble on for a little while about something that I'm really passionate about. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And just remember, it's only rambling on when we don't want to listen. So we all heard you very loud and clear. So thank you, sir. Have a good day. Thank you.
Yes, you as well. Take care, everyone.